The week is flying by, and the Rams are racing against the clock. Like many of you, I'm waiting for Week 1 to kick off. But before September 10th, a few things still need to be sorted out. The Rams have to finalize their 53-man roster, and unfortunately, some players will be left off. I also want to talk about Aaron Donald and mention something that could keep him from suiting up for the Rams this season. We'll also discuss trade rumors involving Stetson Bennett and a few other things. I'll give you all the details right now, but before we go on, make sure you've hit that like button. Only do it, though, if you believe the Rams will make it to the Super Bowl this season. If you can, write this: Go Rams! I believe in the Super Bowl. Now, let's get into it. We all wanted Aaron Donald to return. Seeing one of the greatest defensive players in NFL history in a Rams uniform again would be incredible. But one thing raised a red flag for me. Reports indicate he has a very high-value contract with the Rams. If the figure he asks for, should he decide to come back, is indeed $30 million, that return could be much harder than we expected. The truth is, he hasn't decided yet, but from what I've gathered from media reports, money could be one of the biggest hurdles. And that's where things get complicated. Technically, Donald still has that $30 million contract with the Rams, covering the final year of the deal that was in place when he retired after the 2023 season. ESPN's Adam Schefter also explained that this figure could complicate a potential comeback. Schefter said that if Donald decides he wants to play again, all he has to do is let the Rams know. From there, both sides would have to meet and find a contract solution that works for everyone. And, Rams fans, I think we all want him back, without a doubt, but for $30 million. I believe it will be very difficult for the Rams to accept that figure. Donald returning would be a dream for this fan base, but the financial side cannot be ignored. Now I want to hear from you. If Aaron Donald decides to return, should the Rams pay him $30 million to make it happen? Now we need to talk about something else. Wesley Bailey. This guy just gave the Rams some serious reason to think twice. 10 pressures in a preseason game will grab everyone's attention, but will that be enough to secure him a spot on the Rams' 53-man roster? Bailey has delivered one of the most impressive defensive performances of the 2026 preseason so far. The undrafted player out of Louisville recorded 10 pressures in Saturday afternoon's game between the Los Angeles Rams and New Orleans Saints. That number is impressive. There is no way around it. For an undrafted player fighting for his opportunity, this is exactly the kind of performance you need when every preseason snap matters. But Rams fans have also seen stories like this before, and one great performance does not automatically guarantee a roster spot. Back in 2021, Chris Garrett became a player Rams fans were excited about during the preseason. There is an important difference here. Garrett was actually drafted by Los Angeles, while Bailey entered the NFL undrafted. Bailey also has a physical advantage when we compare the two players. He is about 1 inch taller and roughly 20 pounds heavier than Garrett. And when we look at production, Bailey's 10-pressure performance becomes even more interesting. Garrett never produced 10 pressures in a single preseason game. In fact, he recorded 7 pressures during his entire first preseason. The comparison, however, isn't completely one-sided. Both players showed similar pressure rates, and Bailey has a small advantage in total pressures because he played more snaps. Garrett, meanwhile, received a noticeably better pass-rushing grade from Pro Football Focus, and this is where the Rams' decision becomes more complicated. Playing edge in the NFL requires an unusual combination of size, strength, flexibility, and explosiveness. There simply aren't many people capable of carrying around 250 pounds and still moving with the athletic ability required to consistently beat NFL offensive linemen. There is a reason why the league's best pass rushers are often selected near the beginning of the first round. Finding someone with those physical characteristics is difficult, and finding an unknown prospect who eventually becomes a legitimate NFL pass rusher is even harder. The Rams have found value later in the draft with players such as Byron Young and Josiah Stewart, but that doesn't mean every preseason standout will follow the same path. That is why Bailey's situation is so interesting. 10 pressures deserve attention, especially from an undrafted player trying to force the coaching staff into a difficult decision. But the roster calculation hasn't suddenly changed because of one afternoon. Bailey still has to prove that this performance can become something more than a great preseason moment. But if you're trying to make the Rams' decision difficult, 10 pressures is a pretty good way to start. Now I want to hear from you, Rams fans. After what Wesley Bailey showed against the Saints, would you give him one of those 53 roster spots? Now, we need to talk about another issue that's been making headlines in the media. Rams fans, Stetson Bennett just gave Los Angeles a new question to answer. After an impressive preseason performance, trade talk is suddenly growing. But would moving him now actually help the Rams, or create a problem they don't need? The Los Angeles Rams came out of their preseason game against the New Orleans Saints with plenty to talk about, but one of the biggest conversations involves Stetson Bennett. After playing very well against New Orleans, Bennett suddenly found himself mentioned as a possible trade candidate, with the idea being that the Rams could take advantage of his improved value and get something in return. But when we really look at the situation, trading Bennett right now may not make much sense for Los Angeles. The idea gained attention after Dan Orlovsky suggested that the Atlanta Falcons should consider offering a late-round draft pick for Bennett. And naturally, once that idea appeared, Rams fans started discussing whether Los Angeles should actually listen to offers. I understand why the conversation started. Bennett is coming off a strong performance, the Rams have another young quarterback in Ty Simpson, and when a player is entering the final year of his contract, there is always the temptation to get something for him instead of potentially losing him later for nothing. But there is another side to this. What would the Rams realistically receive for Bennett? That is probably the most important question in this entire conversation. Bennett has never played a regular season snap in the NFL. He turns 29 in October and will be 30 next year. His contract is also expiring, meaning another team acquiring him would have to think about what comes next financially if it wanted to keep him beyond this season. So even after a strong preseason, we probably are not talking about some major trade return. The suggestion was a late-round pick, potentially something around a 7th-round selection. And if that is the type of compensation available, the Rams have to ask themselves a simple question. Is a late-round pick more valuable to this team right now than having another quarterback Sean McVay can trust? That answer becomes even more important because of Ty Simpson. Simpson has given Rams fans reasons to be excited. He looked very good against the Kansas City Chiefs and followed that with another encouraging performance against the Saints. There is talent there, and what we have seen so far has certainly been positive. But we also need to remember how little information the Rams truly have about him in meaningful NFL situations. We have watched 2 preseason games. Simpson played only 15 games at the college level. That doesn't mean he cannot become the Rams' backup quarterback. It doesn't mean the coaching staff doesn't believe in him. It simply means that declaring the position completely solved after 2 preseason appearances would be moving very quickly. If Simpson is not fully ready when the regular season begins, suddenly Bennett's value to this roster looks very different. That is why keeping quarterback depth matters. If this has truly been a competition between Bennett and Simpson, Bennett has remained right in the middle of that battle. Getting rid of one of your options just because another team is willing to send you a late-round pick would be a major gamble. The Rams don't have to make that gamble. Sometimes a player can be more valuable to his current team than he is on the trade market. Bennett might be a perfect example of that situation. His trade value may not bring Los Angeles anything significant, but his presence gives McVay another option at the most important position on the field. And after what we saw against New Orleans, Bennett has done nothing to make the Rams want less quarterback depth. That doesn't mean every positive takeaway from Saturday should be accepted without questions, though. The Rams also received an impressive performance from their backup offensive line, and there has been growing optimism about the depth of that group. There were certainly reasons to be encouraged. Bill Murray has been excellent and arguably one of the biggest standouts of the group. Dylan McMahon has been solid at center, A.J. Arcuri has had good moments, and returned to action against New Orleans after being rested in the first preseason game. Blake Hance has been fine, Wyatt Bowles has done a respectable job, and undrafted free agent Austin Blaske has also impressed. Bryce Henderson has been the major exception, particularly because of his struggles in pass protection. Overall, though, the protection has helped both Bennett and Simpson. The quarterbacks have consistently had time to read the defense, work through what they are seeing, and deliver the football. That matters, and it deserves recognition. But we also have to look at who the Rams were playing. The Saints did not use their starters, and Los Angeles ended up building a 34-0 lead. So while the Rams' offensive line depth looked impressive, it would be premature to say there are no concerns left simply because the backups performed well against New Orleans' backups. The performance should increase confidence. It just shouldn't end the evaluation. And that same careful approach needs to be used when looking at the defensive backfield, because another player generating attention is Elijah Huzzy Hamilton. Hamilton has performed better than expected and has put himself directly into the roster conversation. After what he has shown, it is easy to understand why some Rams fans are starting to call him a lock for the 53-man roster. But that might be going too far. The Rams have a crowded defensive back room, and the starting jobs are already established. Emmanuel Forbes has not even played a preseason snap, which tells you where he stands. The real battle begins farther down the depth chart, where players such as Cam Lampkin and Josh Wallace are also fighting for positions. And this is something fans sometimes forget during preseason. We only see the games. The coaching staff sees everything else. They see training camp practices, they see meetings, they see how players respond to coaching. They see assignments that may not be obvious while watching from home. They know when a defensive back was in the correct position, even if the ball went somewhere else. And they know when a player made a mistake, even if it never became a big play. That makes roster evaluation much more complicated than simply counting interceptions or highlights. Everything coming out of camp has suggested that Lampkin is making a serious push. He has been viewed as a potential breakout candidate and someone who has a legitimate opportunity to make the final 53. Hamilton's strong preseason doesn't automatically change that, and that is actually a very good problem for the Rams. Los Angeles appears to have multiple defensive backs fighting for limited spots, and some of the players who eventually get released could quickly attract attention from other teams. Hamilton, for example, may not remain available for very long if the Rams decide to waive him. Lampkin could be in the same situation, which is one reason keeping him becomes so important. If Los Angeles believes another team would immediately claim him, putting him on waivers with the hope of bringing him back would carry real risk. There is no need to create a problem at quarterback just to say you got something back in a trade. So Rams fans, what do you think? After watching Stetson Bennett play well against the Saints, would you keep him as part of this quarterback room, or would you trade him if another team offered a late-round pick? And after everything we saw against New Orleans, who do you believe absolutely deserves one of those final spots on the Rams' 53-man roster?